Hello everyone. So I'm Bernhard Wenzel. I'm a freelance software engineer, and I'm going to talk about how to use Spring with Scala. Well, first of all, thank you for coming. I know it has been a long, nice conference, and it's Friday evening, and it's sunny outside, and the beach is not far away, so it's not easy to compete with this. So thank you for being here, but I'm going to make it short and sweet. Okay, a first overview. So I'm going to quickly introduce you into this subject and give a motivation why to use Spring with Scala. Then the main part of my talk are going to be practical examples. And then I'm going to evaluate the findings on those examples. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Before starting, one question: who of you is already developing in Scala? Okay, that's maybe 40%. And of those, who has been using Scala with Spring already? No one. Oh, a bit, right. Okay, I think that's good, because so the target audience is like developer with Java and Spring, which I guess most have, and that are either starting to develop in Scala or just curious to do it. If you know Scala in and out already, probably not going to tell you anything new, then maybe the beach is then actually a better idea. Yeah, looking at the agenda of this talk and having seen some talks of it, my talk feels a little bit like this. So we have on one side the Java and Spring family, and it looks like I'm trying to sneak in Scala into this. And yeah, it's a valid question to ask why use Spring with Scala and not just any other Scala framework. And well, so the first question is why Scala actually? And yeah, like most things in IT, you can learn things either for fun or for profit. And for fun, well, if you ask me why Scala, I could ask why learn a new language at all. Learning a new language has lots of advantages. It gives me new ideas, it widens my horizon, it makes me appreciate things more I do already, or maybe the opposite. And well, at least I have never heard that someone became worse by learning a new language. Especially in the Scala case, it's a functional programming language, and as this is at the moment a hot topic, it's nice to have a look into this. And well, yeah, of course you can do it for profit. That's maybe my freelance thinking, but yeah, Scala is becoming a popular language. The famous examples are LinkedIn, Guardian, Twitter, and yeah, Foursquare, and many more. And what I personally like about Scala, being a Java developer, well, at least for a certain type of problems, Scala code tends to be much more concise. That's especially true for problems I can express using functional programming. And the reason for this is that functional programming is built up from the ground into Scala, where in Java, well, in the last iterations, functional programming gets added on top of it, and I think that shows. In Scala, I can mix object-oriented programming with functional programming. For some, that's a disadvantage, and I understand the argumentation. They say if you want to learn functional programming, it's better to have a pure functional programming language, and it's probably also a good idea to try this. So you could try Haskell, or if you like brackets, you could try Clojure. For me, personally, I like that I can use object-oriented methods in Scala just for pragmatic reasons. So I might not always develop the most idiomatic code, but I can get things done, and for me, that's actually an advantage. The Java interop from Scala allows me to move gradually towards Scala, and I will come back to this later. And well, some say that Java 8 is catching up and Scala is becoming obsolete, but I don't know if this will ever happen, but I think at the moment that's certainly not true. Scala has many other features. Just to name one is pattern matching, but there are many more. So let's say, okay, I want to try Scala. It might be a good idea. The next question is why Scala and Spring? There are many pure Scala frameworks out there. And well, I think there are some reasons to do it. Well, first of all, if I learn a new language and I have already the Spring knowledge and the productivity that comes with it, I would like just to focus on Scala. And I personally really like Spring Boot, and I like Gradle, and so I can keep those tools and just learn Scala. Of course, new languages come always with new frameworks, and new frameworks are they are new, means they are unproven. And yeah, if I choose Spring, I know that maybe along the road, if I choose a new framework, I will encounter problems, and in a proven framework, probably someone had found these problems already and has already found an answer. And this assurance I don't have with a new framework, so it might be another reason to choose Spring. Finally, that might be even the most important point, is that I have already an existing Spring Java project, and I want to introduce or want to solve some parts of it in Scala, and I can do this if I combine those two. So, okay, so let's say, okay, it's a worthwhile idea. Let's try and use these two frameworks together. And while preparing this talk, I was thinking, how can I, what's the best way to show how to do this? And well, I had several ideas, but then I remembered, okay, if you go to Spring.io, there are those guides, which I really like. The advantage of the guides are, well, they are very short, yet they demonstrate many Spring features. So I thought maybe it's a good idea if I just take these guides and try to give the same functionality using Scala. So this is what I did. I basically went to the site, I downloaded the guides. They all have a complete Java solution. I basically copy and pasted them into a Scala folder, went through all the Java files and translated them to Scala. Talking about keeping my favorite tool, Scala, the typical tool is SBT. I personally I'm not a big fan of it, and so I kept Gradle as my build tool. And yeah, I made the source code available on GitHub, so if you later want to play around with it, it's all there. Okay, the first example, we start simple, serving web content with Spring MVC. And yeah, so the typical components of a Spring MVC project, well, we have our build file, in this case Gradle. We have our template, and we have our controller. We have our Spring application. We don't have a model here, but I have another example that has a model. So the first question is, how can I make Gradle work with Scala? And it's maybe surprisingly or not, but it's very easy. Basically, I just need to add the Scala plugin to it and add the dependency to Scala. Just in these examples, I also added the application plugin, which is not necessary for Scala, but then I can run all the examples with Gradle run. By the way, who is using Gradle from you? Because all the talks I heard was just about Maven, so not too many actually, I see. But of course, you can also use Maven for this. It would be quite similar. Yeah.
In this, you are not only bringing a Scala library, but also you're making Java compiler to compile Scala.
Yes, it will do. Yes, it will do both. It will compile the Java and the Scala. Yeah, that's true. So the application class, I always show, I start on the top, you see the Java example, and then the translation to Scala. So yeah, very simple. We have our Spring Boot application notation to the application class. And we have our main method where we start the Spring container. We provide the command line arguments. Now in Scala, you don't have static methods, but you have an object next to a class. So that's what we need to do. Our class gets our Spring Boot application annotation. You can, except for one exception, you can use annotation, Java annotation in Scala, just as you would in Java. And in the application object, we extend the app interface, which provides us automatically the arguments. And in Scala, we don't have the class postfix. We have a class of method. And the arguments, maybe if you have never seen it, looks a bit funny, but so we have a colon underscore star annotation, which basically just tells the compiler that this is a var arg type. Yeah, template, of course, we don't have to do anything, just to show, so it's a very simple template, and it just renders a parameter which we pass to the controller. So the controller also very easy on the Java side. So we have our controller annotation. We define an endpoint. We define the parameter for this method, and we return this parameter to the, or pass this parameter to the template. Now in Scala, one thing that's the only exception when you use annotations is that if we can pass several strings into an annotation, and in Scala we automatically have to use an array. So we need to add this, and yeah, maybe you know it, but in Scala you don't really need the return keyword, so we can just return the greeting. And that's it. So you type in Gradle run, you see the container starts up, and you ping the endpoint, providing the parameter, and you get the template rendered as expected. So what did I have to do? I needed to add the Scala plugin to Gradle. I needed to split the application class into a class and object. I needed to run the args with the compiler hint. And in the request mapping annotation, I needed to use an array. Another example. So this time we consume a REST service. Yeah, all the logic is in the application class, and we have just two beans, a quote and a value. Yeah, beans in Java. Nothing exciting, of course. It's just a simple bean with getter and setter. In this case, this example is going to ping a quote endpoint, and it's going to return a quote JSON, and this is the format. Beans in Scala, they are much shorter, less boilerplate. However, they don't follow the bean convention. But if you want to have bean conventions, Scala provides a bean property annotation, so you need to add those to the fields. But then you have the same bean as in Java. Okay, the application class. Yeah, what it's doing is using the REST template, and then it pings this quote service, which is always there, and this quote returns a random quote. And we serialize this into the quote class, and we print this on the console. Now, what do we have to do in Scala? Almost nothing. The only thing is, as already mentioned, we need to do the class of method instead of the suffix. And that's all there is to do. Because that's so simple, let's make it a little bit more interesting. So we use an asynchronous version and use Java Lambdas for it. So in this case, we use the async REST template. And this returns us a future, and to this future we can add callbacks. And we can do this in the Java 8 manner using Lambdas. So it's very nice. We have the add callback method, and for the success case, we provide a Lambda which prints then the quote, or in the failure, it would print the exception. Now, if you start learning Scala, And if you compare Java 8 Lambdas to Scala function literals, it's called in Scala, then you see it's almost the same. So except for parameters are slightly different defined. And instead of a minus sign, we just have the equal sign. So this is then what we want to do. We plug in our function literals into the Scala, into the Spring callback method for success and failure case. However, this does not work. Scala functions are not Scala lambdas. But I have to say yet, I come back to this later, but at the moment does not work. Instead, unfortunately, we need to use ugly anonymous classes. So in this case, we implement the callback interface and implement those two methods for a success and failure case. But that's it. So we run the example, and in the log we can see it will ping the endpoint and it will return a quote. So what did I have to do? I needed to use the bean annotation, and I needed to know that unfortunately Scala functions are not Java lambdas. I cannot just use them. Okay, another example. This time we don't use a REST, an API. We provide a REST API using Spring Data REST. And so we have the application, and in Spring Data REST, you probably know this, so all resolves about repositories, and we have our person resource. So I go straight to Scala. So yes, that's our bean. We have our person entity. We have our ID type, which is a long, and we have a first and last name. Now in Java, easy. So I just have the repository. I just pick one, the paging sorting repository. I provide the person and the ID type. And that's it. And in Scala, so we don't have interfaces, we have traits. And we also just extend the repository with person and long. However, if you run this, it won't work. We get an error message. The problem is here. We pass, unfortunately, if we just type long, we pass the Scala long to a Java interface, and that's not going to work. So we need to use Java lang Java lang long. So what we need to do is we need to explicitly refer the Java base type. You can either do this by importing the long type or by using the full package. And then it will work. You just start the container, and if you ping the endpoint, you see you have an AP waiting there. So what you have to do, I just remember the base types when dealing with Java interfaces from Scala. Okay, final example, JDBC example. I'm going to talk first about the Java example, and then I go to the Scala case. So we access a relational database here, and everything is done via JDBC templates. So first we create a table. And then in this example, let's assume we just have a list of full names, which we then need to split into first and last name to put this into the database. And yes, we do this using Java 8 streams. We have our list, we split the names, and we collect the list back, the results back into a list. Then we do a batch update. Well, first we print the results to the log just to see. And then in the batch update, we have an SQL string, and we pass the collection we just created to it. Finally, to see if it has worked, we do a query. And well, the query interface of the JDBC template is just an SQL string, and then an object of arguments, which we can just pass to the string, and then we have the row mapper, which maps the returned result from the database. So yeah, we just do this, and so we have our query, we have our object array, and we create customer objects. Finally, we print all these customers we just created out on the list just to see that if it has worked. Okay, so the Scala side, the table creation is just one-to-one the same thing. Now we want to create the collection. And you have to know that in Scala, all collections are by default immutable. So if we want to work with Java on the Java side, we have to use mutable collections. And Scala provides a mutable package for this. So we know that, for example, the equivalent of a Java list is a Scala buffer. So we do this in the first step. We have a list buffer in this case. And we split up the names to get the collection, and in Scala it's easier to do. We just do a map and pass our split function to it, so there's no need to collect anything. And then we print out the type, the result, the collection. Now for the batch update, just to remember, so the batch update takes a SQL string and then a list of an object array. And if we want to fulfill this method, well, we need to do some casting on Scala side. First, we need to know, okay, Java-lang object is in Scala is an AnyRef. And the list we know already is the buffer, and an array is an object array in Java is an array in Scala. In Scala, you do typecasting by using an isInstance_of method. And then, yeah, you provide the type you want. However, if you pass this to the Java side, you need to know that you're still on Scala. So this is still a Scala collection, and you cannot give this to Java. What we need to do, we still need to convert it into a Java collection. And for this, Scala has so-called Java converters. And by Scala magic, you just need to import this package, and then you have a method called sjava available. So after you do all the casting, you call sjava, and then you can pass this to Java. Final step, the Scala query. The first two steps we did already. We did the casting. So we need to cast from object to AnyRef, and we need to implement an anonymous class. However, now the other way around, if we're now going to call a query on the JDBC template on Spring, and this returns a Java collection. So this time, if we want to process this result in Scala, we need to convert in the other direction. So we do a Scala. Again, we import the converter, and we do an Scala, and now we can deal with this collection on in Scala. And yeah, if we run this, it's going to work. And we'll see that it creates tables and see the inserting and the result. So what did I have to do? I had to use mutable collection when calling Java. I had to do typecasting from object to AnyRef, from the arrays and the list. And I had to use Scala transformations. Okay. So if you are now sitting here and thinking, I wanted to hear about Scala and Spring, and I was just talking about how to translate between Java and Scala, then you're right. And that's actually good news, because it means it basically works. So Spring is just any other Java library I can use from Scala. I just need to translate from Java to Scala. And well, translating can be complicated. It depends on the case. So if we think about the translation, things that are easy to do is adding the Scala to plug into Gradle, splitting the application cast, that's quite easy. Okay, I have to use an array, and that I have to use the bean property annotation, that's also fine, I think. A bit more annoying is that with the base types, that's easy to forget. The casting can be a bit tiresome, same with the transformation. And that I have to use mutable collections. That's also a drawback. Quite annoying, I find that I can't use Scala functions as Java Lambdas. However, that's going to change. And the next Scala SDK will have a much better Java 8 support. So I will be able to use plug in functions as Lambda as I would do in Java. And that's I think important to know. So the Scala SDK is getting better to deal with Java. And there's the question also, should I use any other frameworks? For example, there used to be, it's still there, but it's not supported anymore, a Spring Scala project, I think around 2012. It eases some of the issues, like I don't need to use bean property annotation. It had a bit more Scala way of working with templates. It wrapped, for example, null values into options and so on. But the question is, do I really want to do this? And I think it's better to be consistent. I might have other Java dependencies, and just knowing that I need to deal with them differently than in another way, I think it's just better to have no further dependency, and just then basically bet on the SDK that it's even getting better and better. So my conclusion is, yes, it just works. You can try it out. It's just another Java framework I can use. The drawbacks of using Spring instead of just a pure Scala framework, well, I cannot always write the most idiomatic Scala code. And the translation can be a bit tiresome, as you could see. But yeah, the advantage is I can keep my Spring knowledge, my productivity I had. And I know that the Scala SDK is getting better, and it's already quite good. And problems I have now may become obsolete. And that's it. So as mentioned, the source code is available on GitHub. And I have also my slides. You can access them. And if you have any questions, please contact me. Or do you have a few questions now? Of course, ask now. Any questions? No. So thanks.